See such a turnout both here and on the screen. So what we're going to do is have each of the we'll have each of the candidates speak. First the select board candidates, and then the school board candidates, and then we'll open it up for comments. Each of them will speak for 3 or 4 minutes, I hope. So who wants to start for the select board?
You're the moderator. You can.
Why don't you start?
Okay. Well, unmask for this.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I'm grateful. Can you hear me? Are we good? And I'm grateful for the opportunity, and grateful to the town for organizing this tonight. These are the sorts of conversations that should happen very often, and I know that I share Steve's opinion that we're honored to be a part of this. I am only sad that 50% of my family is stuck, literally stuck in New Orleans, which is not necessarily a bad place to be stuck at the beginning of Mardi Gras, but my daughter Eliza is here, and my wife and my other daughter were supposed to be back yesterday, but of course the snow conspired to cancel 2 days worth of flights. So I'm sad that they are not here, but look forward to you meeting them later on. Absolutely. I'm David Roth. I'm here because we believe, my family and I, St. Johnsbury it's a remarkable place with a truly remarkable history, and I believe a remarkable opportunity for our future. My family and I are here not because we were born or grew up here, but because we chose St. Johnsbury specifically. We love the community.
I don't understand a word he's saying.
Should I? Maybe I'll bring the mic a little bit closer. Is that good?
Why don't you come over here?
Come over there? All right, I'll come over there. How is that? I'll project for here and on Zoom. Does that make it better? Someone give a thumbs up, or can you hear me? Oh, that's a thumbs up. Oh my, okay. As I said, my family and I are here not because I grew up here, or not because we grew up here. We chose St. Johnsbury specifically. We love the community. We love the people. We love the beauty, we love the history, we love the opportunities, we love the weather. I truly love the weather, actually. I love this weather more than anything. I've been fortunate enough to live and work all around the world, but we chose St. Johnsbury as home for some very specific reasons. Those of you who know my family, and again, who don't, we will hopefully all meet, we are truly the little United Nations. And we are more at home here in St. Johnsbury than we've been anywhere else on earth. And from my perspective, that is truly saying something profound. One of Vermont's most famous sons, John Dewey, said that democracy begins at home. And its home are our towns and small communities. I agree completely, and generally I agree with so much of what John Dewey did and wrote. And I believe deeply that being part of a community means truly engaging in all aspects of life in a community. My father always said to me, don't talk about it, do it. And that's exactly what I've tried to do for my whole life and career. Actions speak far louder than words. And I believe that public service is the cornerstone generally of a democracy, but certainly of Vermont's democracy. And it's our responsibility, certainly my responsibility, to stand up and be part of the process that leads us forward and that leaves none of us behind. I will always commit to putting my time, my energy, my resources where my mouth is. Don't just simply talk about it. Don't just simply write about it. Just simply do it. The fundamental roles of a select board member, I believe, can be distilled to 3 broad concepts. 1, listen. Listen to the community, all members of the community, and seek out those who tend to be quiet. Number 2, help craft the agenda. Help craft the agenda of the issues that need to be discussed based on that listening, especially listening to those people whose interests are often overlooked. Our job, in fact, the job generally of government, I believe, is to create the conditions for success, but also to protect the vulnerable who often suffer in silence or are too often ignored. And number 3, provide financial oversight of the town's budget and resources, and provide a very important check and balance for the town's professional staff. I know that's what the residents of St. Johnsbury want, and I know that's what the town's staff wants as well. I hope and I know that we will talk about specifics tonight. I very much look forward to it, but just a couple fun facts as I wrap up. I'm a sommelier, which means we can look forward to wine tastings as we get to know everyone. I'm a drummer. I'm a passionate advocate for the inclusion of music and arts in schools. I'm the immediate past chair of the Rock and Soul Forever Foundation, founded by my friend and partner Stevie Van Zandt and Bono and a number of other luminaries. I'm a snowboarder, but most importantly, I'm a snowboard dad to a daughter, which is the reason we're stayed here this week. My daughter is hoping to be invited to national snowboard finals in Colorado next month. All of the businesses that I own and run relate to organic agriculture and wellness, including the maple industry right here in St. Johnsbury. And we look forward to reestablishing St. Johnsbury as the maple capital of the world, as George Carey would have wanted, and as he articulated from our base right up the road on Railroad Street, the current Artful Eye building. Our goal is that Vermonters and visitors from all over come here to explore and taste the bounty of the Northeast Kingdom and of Vermont's sugar bushes and our farms, and then visit as many local businesses as possible in the process. Tour buses and tourists inside those buses should not be passing us by, and we'll do everything we can to make sure they don't in the future. Well, thank you all very much. I look forward to your questions.
Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Aisho, and I want to thank Chad for arranging this forum, David for moderating it, and for all of you who have turned out tonight or tuned in. I'm looking forward to having a great discussion about the future of St. Johnsbury. I believe that St. Johnsbury has been successful in creating a stronger community over the past few years. Tens of millions of dollars have been or are being invested in St. Johnsbury. And this, along with our creative and our recreational activities, have combined to form a renewing community. And that doesn't surprise me because St. Johnsbury has always adapted to the challenges that it has faced. And I want that success to continue. When I was asked to run for a 3-year term on the Board of Selectmen, I decided I would run for the open seat. I'm proud to be a Vermonter, and I'm proud to have been born and raised in St. Johnsbury. Serving on the Select Board would be a great opportunity for me to give back to the town I love. I was born here in Brightbrook Hospital, raised here, educated here. I know what it means to have classes at the Fairbanks Museum because I attended them in grade school. I know the value of the Athenaeum because I have spent thousands of hours in that building. And the Athenaeum is my favorite building in town. I would love to own it and live in it. I know that St. Johnsbury has a great education offering because I attended Frank R. Adams School, Summer Street, the junior high, the academy. I know how important it is for community outdoor spaces like the Knob, because I played there as a boy. So when I go to make decisions on the select board, I'm not going to be making theoretical decisions, because I have lived experience of St. Johnsbury, and that gives me a wider understanding of what efficient use of tax money means. I attended Linden State College, earning a bachelor's degree in mathematics. Then I went on to earn a master's in applied statistics at the University of South Carolina. So, Northern Vermont, South Carolina, culture shock. In a year and a half ago, I retired as a research data analyst. Like many young Vermonters, my career forced me to move out of state if I wanted to have that career. But as they say, you can take the boy out of Vermont, but you can't take Vermont out of the boy. And so 10 years ago, I bought an 1853 farmhouse in East St. Johnsbury, and I lived there with my 2 Labrador retrievers. Barnabas, who's a 4-year-old yellow lab, and Zoe, who's a 2-year-old black lab. And before I moved back permanently in 2017, I worked remotely from my home here on and off throughout the year. If I'm elected to the select board, I'll be the only member who lives outside the special services district. And so that will widen the perspective of the select board. It was my desire to give back to St. Johnsbury in my faith and belief that we have a moral obligation for the care of creation that I volunteered to join the Town Energy Committee. And since I've been on that committee, I've attended many programs, webinars, and workshops so I could serve better in that capacity. And that's why I joined the Vermont Community Leadership Network, which is organized by the Vermont Council on Rural Development, VCRD. Last summer, I was one of several Town Energy Committee members that worked with VCAN to develop a resource toolkit for use with town energy communities. And I think it's a great toolkit that could be used by any organization. And then last fall, I was one of 16 Vermonters who was selected to participate in the Climate Catalyst Leadership Program. That's also organized by VCRD. And I was selected not only for my work on the Town Energy Committee here, but also for the project for a local community-based project that I submitted, and since it's been accepted, I'm now working on that. As a member of the Select Board, my focus would only be on St. Johnsbury. I have no alternative motive. And the reason I'm running is because I want to help every single member of the community of St. Johnsbury. Thank you.
Just to be clear, Steve and David are running against each other for the 3-year seat. We also have somebody not up for a contested race, but you're welcome me to say a few words.
Sure, great. So, thank you for having me tonight. And as David mentioned, I'm running for an uncontested seat on the select board. My name is Tracy Shao. And I felt it was still important to come tonight to introduce myself to the residents and voters who don't know me yet, to listen and learn from the questions coming from residents and voters, answer them if necessary, but also recognize that the folks that are here in contested races need the opportunity to show you what your choices are, and so I want to be respectful of that, but I appreciate the 2 minutes to introduce myself. I'm happy to answer questions if needed. My husband, Kurt, and I have lived in the area for about 22 years. We lived in Danville before moving to St. Johnsbury 6 years ago. But we had been business owners here in St. Johnsbury prior to becoming St. J residents. We're part of the ownership group of Kingdom Tavern and Table and also MBZ Holdings, where we invest in commercial real estate here in St. Johnsbury. Our daughter attended St. Johnsbury School and is now at St. Johnsbury Academy, and our son graduated from the academy last year. Professionally, I help run a statewide nonprofit and have spent most of my career working on land conservation and community economic development projects in the Northeast Kingdom and across the state. And through that work, I've interacted with many select boards and community volunteers and have seen just how critical a good, functioning town government is to the success of a community, but especially to the forward progress of a community. And I think St. Johnsbury is really setting the standard right now in that. I've been a coach and a school volunteer. I've served and continue to serve on a number of community nonprofits. I was chair of the board of the Fairbanks Museum for 4 years, and I now serve on the Friends of Dog Mountain Board and also Green Mountain Farm to School. I'm a director of Passumpsic Savings Bank, and I'm a corporator at NBRH. And since moving to St. J, I have been a member of the Halloween Parade Committee, which has been so much fun, and the Main Street Decorating Group. And I hope to spearhead the effort to help the town of St. Johnsbury purchase the knob this year and led the community fundraising campaign that made that possible. I love living in St. Johnsbury, and I believe very strongly in the potential for all to enjoy and benefit from living and working here. And I'm really excited about the positive momentum in our community right now. And I know it takes all of us to move a community forward, town government, but also the business community, residents, volunteers, and our community nonprofits. Collaborating, playing off our collective strengths, and rowing in the same direction as much as possible is really key to success. And I've seen other communities really falter when that isn't the case. And so when I heard that there were going to be several open seats on the select board this year, I decided to step up and run because I really want to continue the positive and collaborative work of the previous board and continue the good work that the members who are stepping off have been part of because we have so many opportunities ahead of us in this community and also real challenges. And a good functioning board that works well with each other and with our really dedicated and talented town employees, listens to our residents, that thoughtfully weighs options, and that is forward-thinking is really critical right now to capitalize on the moment that we're in. So I promise to work hard, to listen, to be approachable and available, and to keep the best interests of the town in mind. Thank you.
And I believe the remaining folks to speak are all running for school board. We have a contested race between Peter Van Stratten and Lisa Whitney, and I'll start with them. So, Peter, would you like to go first?
Hi, I'm Peter Van Stratten. I'm running for school board. I've lived in St. Johnsbury with my family for about 8 years. I have 2 kids at the school, a 3rd grader and a kindergartner. I spend a lot of time volunteering at the school. I'm on several committees there, strategic planning committee, public relations, reigniting education, and the after-school program committee. I also attend all of the meetings that we have for the school board. I enjoy spending time there and doing that kind of work. It interests me. So I'd like to give it a shot. I've said before, honestly, I wish Dean Rankin was running again. I think he did a great job. Asked him very nicely, but he declined. So I'd like to take a shot at filling his shoes. Professionally, I have a degree in biochemistry, and I spent about 20 years in the biotech industry, most recently done at Novo Nordisk in West Lebanon. My wife works at the hospital here, and we love living here. So it's doing this out of interest, and I think it's good work to be done.
Great.
I can trip over a wire. All right, I did it. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and being here and taking time out of your Saturday evening to join us. My name is Lisa Whitney. I'm the owner and veterinarian at the Danville Animal Hospital, and I've lived here for, I think, 19 years now. And I'd very much like to give something back to this community. If I'm going to give something back, it should be something I'm passionate about, and that's education and children. I'm the mom of 3 kids, and a little bit of a dark horse here because none of my children have attended the St. Johnsbury School. They were all homeschooled. So what I have to offer you here is a fresh and unique perspective on education and ways that we can educate children. I definitely think outside of the box on this one, and I would like to bring that to our community. Have a real focus here on the cost of our education and the value of the education, and making sure that what the taxpayers are putting into that school is of good value to them, and equally importantly, of good value to these children that we're educating, making sure that everyone's really getting something out of it for what we're putting in. So, thanks again for taking the time to come out and meet me tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eileen Dickinson, and I am running for the uncontested seat for the St. Johnsbury School Board. I have had the privilege of serving on the school board for a little bit more than 3 years now. Professionally, I'm a teacher at St. Johnsbury Academy, teaching the mathematics department, computer science, capstone, a little bit of everything. I have 4 children who attend the St. Johnsbury School. I have 2 second graders, a 4th grader, and a 7th grader. And I really appreciate how I've been supported in the past and the perspective of education and a person who's in the classroom and a person who works with recent graduates and who's really committed to the learning and the whole child. And that's really what I focus on, what I ask a lot of questions about. Sometimes they tease me about how many questions I ask, but it's okay. I'm not going to stop that. So yeah, thank you again. And like Tracy said, please, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to make sure I said hello and thank you. And thanks again.
Please get one question that came in through the chat.
All right, I was going to say, the way we'll do questions is we can take one from the screen and then one from the audience, and we'll alternate. So what is the question from?
Scroll up. I believe this is coming from Greg Robbins online, and the question, I believe, is for the select board members, but Greg, if you think if I'm wrong, just let me know. So what do the candidates plan to solve the drug crime issues in St. J if they are elected?
Should we,
Yeah,
should we
you
come? Should we
can
sit
take
here?
off your mask.
Should we sit here or come up?
Well, it's going to get...
Probably should come up just to make sure the folks will be here. I know it's kind of awkward, but
Well, I think overall, what is needed is to support our police in their effort and make sure that they get the training that they need in order to protect our community. There's also, I think part of this is that as the community renews itself and faces these challenges, that we, the people, also can be involved. Some of these can be even like neighborhood watch programs and whatnot. So it does take a whole community in order to solve it. But the big thing, on the select board is I'm going to be very, very supportive of the police. I think here in St. Johnsbury, we're lucky we don't have a police force that's constantly making it the news for doing something aggressive or something like that. So the programs, and also I think with the state of Vermont, there's some programs that we could also
be in touch with to help with the problem. Thank you for that question. It's a very profound one, and one with which we could spend an entire evening wrestling, but I think there are three things specifically to talk about. And I think, as we all have seen, over this course of this pandemic, there has also been a parallel pandemic of drug use and drug abuse that has certainly affected our community, but has affected so many communities around the country. Those have so many different aspects to it, certainly public safety. So specifically to the Select Board, as Steve said, obviously supporting our public safety infrastructure and personnel is critical. But beyond that, we also need to ensure that we are not a transshipment space and a transshipment area for drugs that are moving between states or even between countries, as I think we have seen so many times. We have often been, too often, a transshipment place, a transshipment state, and in fact our community has also been caught in those crosshairs. We need to try to address that as well. And third, very specifically, there's an economic component to this that we had talked about before, relative to housing, relative to ensuring that we have proper housing, safe housing, such that we're not necessarily concentrating people, say, at a local motel, at the Fairbanks Inn, which has been too often a nexus point for behavior that has led to other behaviors that are not in the best interest of our community. So I think this is a very significant issue that requires us to look at it from a few different angles, but very specifically, we need to make sure that we are, of course, focusing on quality of life here, which means, of course, quality of our public safety infrastructure. But thank you again for that question.
Yes, I'll echo the other candidates. Respect for that question and that issue. It's a big issue, and I think I'm largely going to echo what's already been said, which is that it takes a multi-pronged approach. It's not going to be the Select Board alone, but I think the Select Board thinking about the policies and investments that help move us forward and support public safety, investment in housing, and also not getting in the way of the many others working on the drug issue, including the community nonprofits, volunteers. And I think, thinking about our kids and, having school board members here and recognizing that raising good kids and supporting our youth is also a really key strategy. It's not going to solve the immediate problem, but it might help solve the future problem. So I would add that I hadn't heard yet. Thank you.
Do we have a question from the audience here for either the school board or select board candidates? Yes.
Do you want to come up there? Or
Yeah, it might, yeah.
Within about 10 feet of the speaker.
Okay, yeah, sure. This is a good spot?
Sure.
Thank you, Scott. That's from St. Johnsbury. I think you're all familiar with this topic, but at the recent school board deliberations for the FY23 budget, there were 11 or 12 positions added. Half of them were permanent positions, I believe, and the other half were positions that would be evaluated and then maybe turned into a long-term, maybe not. We also have a projection from the school board that they're expecting our student population to decrease somewhere in the area of 10 to 20% in the next 10 years. I think you all know that our tax rate is determined by how much we spend per pupil. So we have expenses going one direction, and we have numbers of expected pupils going in the other direction, which could put a tremendous amount of pressure on our education
tax rate. And I'm just curious what your comments or thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Go in the same order as before?
Right, so the first part of your question regarding the,
Might take off your glasses.
sorry. The first part of the question regarding the new positions at the school, yes, some of them are designed to be permanent positions. Some of them are already designed to be short-term positions, and they know will not be renewed. And then some of those that are scheduled to be short-term positions, they could be reevaluated to see how they go in the future. It does seem, to me, once you bring someone on board, it's going to be likely that the recommendation is to keep those people. And that, of course, would impact the tax rate. It's hard to say. I know there's a lot of talk in the state legislature about changing the way schools are funded. So it's somewhat of a hypothetical question, I guess. But it's hard to control costs because so much of the percentage of the budget is school salary. I mean, that's the bulk of it. I think it's 80% of the budget is school salary. So if you're talking about lowering the school budget, what you're really talking about is taking away positions. So if our student population does decrease in the future, if we have less students in a grade or in a class, then it might be reasonable to take away, if you have, 9 or 10 kids and all the third grade classes, maybe that number should be 15 kids in a third grade classroom. So that's one way to control costs. Does that answer your question?
It wasn't a question, just a comment, but thank you.
So I'm glad you asked this question, because that's why I'm sitting here. 100% that's why I'm sitting here. I look at the budget every year, I go to the ballot, and I vote against the school budget every single year, because the amount of money we spend is exorbitant. We're adding administrators, again, there's very few teachers and those people being added, right? The budget goes up. I've sat at the school board meetings in the past and we added more administrators, and I've said, what's the accountability for this position? In a year, we've added this new person, they've got this job. Where's the accountability? What boxes do we check at the end of the year to see if this person added value to the education of the kids? And everyone kind of shrugged and blew it off. And I don't think it's okay. I would very much like to see a more scaled down version of our school. I admit that I don't have all the answers. I don't sit at the school board meetings every week. I work on Monday evenings, so it's not really easy for me to be there. But as a citizen and as a parent and as an educator of my own children, I admit that I don't understand either why the budget is what it is and why we take so many people to educate these kids. I don't understand why we're adding more when we're looking at numbers of students falling, and that for me is the biggest concern and the thing that I would like to see addressed if I get elected to this position.
Okay. Good question, or good statement, observation. So, as it's been said, some of these positions are kind of new teacher positions. The restructuring of the middle school is where quite a few, probably I think a third of the positions are coming in. And I think that's, with the money that we have right now, it's time to invest in models that are current in education and that serve our students in a way that they need to be served so that they are successful moving forward. Some of the positions are consultants, which will strengthen the teachers, the faculty, the staff, everybody that we have at the school currently, and those are not projected to be carried into the future. And I can tell you that as a classroom teacher, the investment that you put into children at an early age, while it has a heavy price tag, is less expensive than what you're going to invest as children get older if you're not able to help with learning and behaviors. And I promise that I ask these questions all the time. And we are currently doing a strategic plan for the school. So in terms of accountability, you can look at how these positions are going to be tied to our ESSER spending, how they're going to be tied to our long-term planning, and what our measurements, the outcome, the desired outcomes, and what measurements we're going to take in order to say, like, are we meeting these outcomes? They're all going to be, put in writing for people to see. So a lot of what the school board had passed for a budget is going to be tied eventually to that long-term planning as well. So there will be accountability and ways for people to see. And if they're not working, hard decisions will need to be made. That's part of schooling, right? As a teacher myself, I understand that, sometimes you can reduce costs by attrition, and then other times, unfortunately, you have to make really difficult personnel decisions. But the investment in our children is what's going to help move this community forward for the future and continue the positive momentum that we have, and really looking at long-term societal problems and concerns. That early investment and that early spending is where you can really make a difference in the lives of the children and the direction of our community. Thank you.
Do we have a question from?
To Lisa, it says that you seem committed to shrinking the overall budget of the school district. How do you plan to meet the programmatic needs of our school? And we'll ask Lisa Emerson, because she's a teacher there, with a reduced budget.
All right.
Thank you, Lisa, for that question. I can't give you a specific answer. It's going to be another year until we have another budget to make, so I have a lot of time to educate myself and learn and come up with some solutions to that. But what I would really like to see is more of our budget going directly to teachers, to recruiting excellent teachers, to retaining excellent teachers, to putting more hands-on teaching people with these kids, and at least from where I'm sitting right now, less administrative positions and that sort of thing.
This is a Texas two-step here. Do we have a question from the audience here? So I'll have the person behind you first.
For the benefit of the microphone, I'm Lenny Girardi, and I live in St. Johnsbury Town, not in the Special Service District. The select board positions are kind of like the top jobs in a town. And so there's
Not
always
the moderator?
What's that?
Not the moderator?
One day per year. So there's always this question about kind of like progressive responsibility, and Mr. Aisho mentioned something about decision making. So one of the roles, maybe the principal role of the select board, is making decisions. So what would be really helpful for me to hear is, within the town of St. Johnsbury, what boards, committees, commissions have the various select board candidates served on, and which ones have they chaired? And so that's just a request for information. I'd also be interested in hearing your perspective on two things. One is bringing ambulance service for St. Johnsbury into the fire department. And the other one is, what are your ideas about police service in the Special Services District being moved outside of the Special Services District to the rest of the town? Thank you.
Okay. So the questions are...
I got it.
All right.
I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Those are great questions. So first, I've served on the Charter Review Commission that was appointed by the town manager, and a few of our fellow commissioners are here. I've also served on and I am serving on the Strategic Planning Design Committee for the school district. And that is an extraordinarily exciting process as we look forward to a long-term strategic plan for the district. Again, I have one daughter at the academy, another daughter will be going to the academy next year, and I take that very, very, very seriously, and we look forward also relative to the Charter Commission to doing some really interesting work in this next go-around. Relative beyond St. Johnsbury, Governor Scott invited me to serve on the Commission on the Future of Vermont Agriculture Committee, and that work is ongoing. A lot of my focus has been very specifically on the future of agriculture relative to organic farming and relative to sustainable farming, specifically focusing on issues related to climate change and how our farms and our specifically maple industry can withstand that climate change, as well as I have a number of other interests. As I mentioned, we just acquired the Artful Eye building, and that, when I talk about the center of the maple industry, I'm being very specific as to that property. Now, for your other questions, when we first moved here, it's a really interesting question. One of the first questions I had is why there wasn't ambulance service within the fire department. So I can only answer that by saying I believe that would be something I would certainly want to look into and advocate for there to be a comprehensive, if you will, life safety process within our existing infrastructure. Similarly, police service outside special services, and we talked about this during our Charter Commission meetings, is I also believe important that we are providing a level and a quality of service beyond the special services, such that families or individuals who live outside the special services are not somehow required to have longer wait times or a different level of service than those of us who are living in the special services district. Obviously, there are economics associated with all of that, but certainly those have already been subjects with which a few of us have had conversations, and I would think and hope, again, to the job of a select board member, that's part of crafting the agenda to make sure that they are continually addressed. Thank you for asking that.
I've served on the board of a lot of nonprofits and other organizations, but I gave a lot of those up when I moved back home here to St. Johnsbury. So the only one that technically is in St. Johnsbury would be the Town Energy Committee. But I've also worked with some that are Vermont, because I love Vermont as much as St. J. As far as the ambulance moving in and the police force, you know what David said, but also, you know, what's the budgetary impacts on doing that? And that has to be weighed with the quality of service and for the quality of life. As someone who lives outside in East St. Johnsbury, it would be nice maybe to have the police, but at the same time, I have no complaints about the state police covering us at all. We're pretty peaceful out there. Well, there's a couple of dogs, but besides that, so, you know, budgetary. I also would very much want to coordinate with what, you know, Chad, Joe, and the town is already doing and going on and look at this. And just so that you know, I was a proponent of the armory, and I supported voting for the bond issue for the police and call center.
You want to address that too?
In the interest of time, I think I'd ask whether that's needed, or I don't know how much time we have, so I don't want to. All night, yeah, all night, I just heard. Great.
Not so fast.
I will speak briefly.
Tracy, you got a comment online. People are asking that when people approach the microphone, just to remind everybody who you are.
Oh, okay. Tracy Shao. I am a candidate for the one-year position, one-year seat on the select board. And Great questions, Len. In terms of, I spoke in my intro to the numerous boards that I've been a part of in leadership positions there. In terms of St. Johnsbury, this would be my first leadership position in St. Johnsbury, other than some volunteer opportunities that I've been a part of since moving from Danville to here. I guess the other thing I'd note is that I was the founding chair of the Danville Conservation Commission and chaired that commission for, I think, 10 years, and so did participate in a different town in that sort of capacity. And in terms of the decisions around merging ambulance with police and the Special Services District, I think those are big questions, and you're right to ask them. I think the Select Board is grappling with those, and I think what's already been stated about weighing the costs, the strategy around them, why it hasn't happened yet. I would need to educate myself a lot more and would look forward to doing that before I had strong opinions to state tonight. I think that would be dangerous, frankly, but it's good to know the questions and the concerns there, and then following up as a member of the Select Board.
Anything from at home?
If there's anybody that's online that would like to ask a question, they can either raise their hand or they can just unmute themselves.
Okay. If not, Lucy, you had a question?
I think it's been already answered.
Oh.
This letter that Frank Hensall...
Can you speak from over here? Nobody can hear you.
The letter that Frank Hensall wrote in support of David Roth disturbed me. But I think he's already answered my question that I had, that he is cognizant of climate change, that he is aware of each one of us in St. Johnsbury has an obligation to reduce our carbon footprint, as you call it, whereas it sounded like the other Select Board member who wrote this letter seemed to think we were not contributing to climate change. Thank you.
Can I speak to that for just a minute, since we have some time?
Yep.
All night.
We have all night.
Stop that.
No. I'm glad you brought that up, because in fact it's a very significant issue. Climate change obviously is having an impact upon all of us all the time. What happened this past week? 70 degrees, then 40 degrees. Again, I see it within agriculture here and around the world. But specifically to your point, certainly, we need to focus on everything we can to increase the use of renewables, increase the use of what we can do to make sure that energy is, we are as efficient as possible relative to taxation. And this is a bit of a larger issue. I have always, my whole life, and it of course relates to the Select Board, been a fan of progressive taxation. I am not a fan of regressive taxation, meaning I am not a fan of increased taxes on things people need to live and to use every day. So for example, at a time now in our history when inflation, we all see where inflation is going. We could talk about that all night as well. We see the costs people are having to bear to heat their homes or to drive to work or to drive anywhere they are, adding additional taxes or costs onto those things that so many people need to survive. I consider that regressive taxation. We could have an entire conversation about progressive taxation. I have a podcast called Bold Ideas from Vermont. And I actually did a podcast, one of my first podcasts was about, we moved as a family. We moved from Florida to Vermont, right? No taxes to a relatively high tax state. But it is because we looked at what Vermont is and says, that makes sense. This is not only worth paying for, but those taxes are important to our quality of life. And so the larger question of taxation is a very big one. And from a Select Board perspective, obviously it's not as much within our bailiwick. But I am absolutely a fan of taxation that is progressive and that ensures that we are all moving forward and that does not cause even more pain at a time when so many people are feeling pain. And for those, I'm David Roth, since we're going to be introducing ourselves each time. I'll do it at the end. But thank you for asking that.
Well, can I ask another question?
Yep.
We have all night.
I was not, I didn't mean to bring up the rest of the letter as you did. My only concern was the idea that we all can't turn our heat down, put on more clothes, maybe drive our car less and walk, things of this nature.
Yeah, the reason I'm smiling, and my daughter, she's wearing a jacket back there, but I completely agree with you. And at our house, I am the one that is always saying, turn it down, turn it down, turn it down, because we need to conserve. So to the extent, again, the way that I began the conversation, conservation relative to efficiency is so critical that it not only is, it's not a luxury. We don't have that luxury. We have to do that. We have to do that not only to save our communities and our planet, but to save those things that in many ways are the engine for Vermont, which again is, to my belief, is agriculture. If we're not clear about doing what we can to be efficient, we're going to lose so many of the drivers of the economy here in Vermont. So again, I'm glad you asked that. I hope that is responsive.
You guys want to, Stephen, Tracy, you want to respond?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to say thank you. Just have to have dinner reservations, so I don't have all night. But anyway, thank you very much for coming, and I found it very fascinating. Thank you.
Enjoy dinner. You can bring, we'll be here all night, so bring takeout. Bring takeout.
Hi, I'm Steve Aisho. I want to make perfectly clear that I have never supported or advocated for a carbon tax. In fact, it will never come before the Board of Selectmen, so it's a non-issue to begin with. But second of all, if a carbon tax came before the Select Board, I would vote against it. It would be stupid to put a tax on fuel in St. Johnsbury. It's ridiculous. And since we have all night, can I speak about the climate crisis all night?
As long as I can speak about infrastructure.
That's a good topic, too.
Tracy, do you want to? You're fine? Okay. All right. So,
Infrastructure and climate.
any questions from afar?
I have a question, David.
Yes, Bob Swartz.
And I'm Bob Swartz. I don't know if you can see me or hear me.
We can.
Oh, good. I have a question. We're going to really miss Kevin Audie's years of experience in leading wonderful meetings where people were heard and respected and responded to. Do any of the candidates tonight have experience with leading good meetings?
That's a great question.
I think you're Steve Isham, right?
And I'm Steve Isham. Yes, Bob, I have quite a bit. First of all, at work, I manage projects, I manage people, I ran a ton of meetings. With the church, I'm Episcopalian. I have been in leadership positions in the church at the local level, at the diocese level, at the national level. In fact, I'm a trainer in one program with the Episcopal Church, and in fact, in 2 weeks, I'll be facilitating a training for mentors in that program. So I have had quite a bit of experience facilitating meetings, and I have done a lot of training of other people to facilitate meetings. But I don't expect that if I'm elected, I'll be the chair.
I'm David Roth, and thank you for that question. Certainly in my professional life, I have a global team of over 400 people with whom I have to deal every day. My family knows my hours are a little odd because I have part of my team in Asia, part in Europe, part here in Vermont, part in Florida, and part in California, which means there's never a time when everyone is sleeping. My job with that team, and it really relates to your question, my job with the team is to empower, to make sure that everyone not only is heard, but that solutions often come, as I said at the outset in my remarks, solutions often come from he or she who is often most quiet. Oftentimes I see that when I'm running a meeting, the person who doesn't speak up oftentimes needs to be invited in to a conversation in order to make his or her opinion clear. From a leadership perspective, and again, I didn't speak about it before because it's not Vermont specific, I was appointed by the governor of California to chair the California Student Aid Commission. It's the equivalent of VSAC, the group that runs the entirety of the scholarship program in California. It's about a $7 billion budget, and I was chair for almost 7 years. I was actually the youngest chair they had ever had, and I only left when we moved. But that was a role where not only did I have to corral the commission and keep the process in order, but we had to be responsive to the governor and the legislature and an entire group of educators in California who certainly didn't always head the same direction. But again, it was about making sure that no one felt steamrolled, that no one felt overruled, and that everyone felt as though they, A, had a seat at the table. But having a seat does not mean that your opinion is heard, and that's important as well. Infrastructure, because we might not get a chance, I know we'll be here, but this is Edward Fairbank's book, and you made me realize I wanted to just read one thing that made me laugh related to infrastructure. 1790, the Select Board wrote this to the General Assembly, to Montpelier, about infrastructure. Humbly showeth that we suffer under great inconvenience from the want of proper roads and bridges in the township of St. Johnsbury. That was written in 1790. So when you said, that's why I brought the book. I knew someone would bring up infrastructure.
Tracy, do you want to say anything about it? All right. Any other? Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment.
We need you to stand over here. I'm sorry.
Take my yellow. For the people that aren't aware, for some of the luxuries we have in town, we're in a separate budget. We pay more taxes that you don't pay if you live out in East St. Johnsbury. So while I can understand why you want these things, you just got to realize they got to change the whole tax structure of the town to do this.
So that's a comment. Okay, good enough. Anybody still from home wanting to say anything? If not,
my name is Lynn Wurzburg. I have a question for the school board candidates. My husband and I have had a lot of experience with St. Johnsbury School over the years, Lynn and out of Wurzburg, and I just finished doing an after-school program, the CATS program. I did a session. It was the Environmental Stewardship Club. I had about 5 fourth graders and 1 fifth grader. There's a huge deficit with kids with having experience outdoors and doing things, making things, doing things, learning. There's money in the budget for, I'm pretty sure they're trying to get a new position. I'm not sure what they're calling it. They might call it experiential learning, which would be someone who would be planning a lot of, environmental outdoor things so that the teachers wouldn't have to do it. I mean, doing all these kind of interactive outdoor and hands-on things takes a lot of planning. The teachers simply do not have the time. It's hugely important. There's already some of that stuff going on, but it's fallen by the wayside, a lot of it, because of the pandemic. So there's that position, hopefully in the budget. So my question is, would you be willing to support it? Because a lot of other school districts have them now, and we have to compete with them. And I think it's super important. We've also, another question is, would you be willing to consider reinstating something, it used to be called industrial arts and home ec. We need some modern version of that. Costs money, costs more teachers. But these kids need it and they love it. That's what makes some kids go to school, because that saves them. They're not, might not be academics, but that keeps them there. They learn how to, build things, automotive, there's all kinds of offshoots of that. That got taken out of the budget years and years ago. We had programs, and a lot of schools, it was part of the fallout from having so much testing, so they cut budgets so they could test more. We spend so much time testing. So my question is, A, would you support the experiential learning position? And B, would you be willing to research and maybe support programs that would, be hands-on, in what, for lack of better definition, home ec and industrial arts, or the modern version.
Okay.
Hi, Peter Van Stratten again. The answer is yes to the outdoor education coordinator position. It is in the budget this year, and it is approved. So I totally support it. I'm a big fan of outdoor education and that kind of project-based learning. I like it because my kids like it. They respond to it, and I've seen a lot of kids respond to it. They seem to behave differently when they're outside, and it seems to be good for everybody. So I believe that coordinator's job is to, like you said, the teachers don't have time to plan for all those activities, so that's what they'll be doing. I believe that's funded through the ESSER funds as well, the federal grant money. As far as the industrial arts question, that sounds interesting to me. I like the idea of it. I would rely on the principals to tell the school board, hey, this is something that we need, this is why we need it, it's important, and then go based on their recommendation.
Lisa Whitney again, thank you. A position? No, I don't necessarily support the position. It's in the budget already, I know, and it's one of the ones I sort of circled and said, do I support the idea of kids being outside? Absolutely. Do I support experiential learning? Absolutely. Big part of the reason my children were homeschooled is because there's more than one way for kids to learn. They don't all need to learn the same things. They don't all need to learn the same way. They're just not able to learn the same way. So I think the more options that we have and the more ways that we can engage children in their education, even if it's not what we consider traditional education, the better off our kids are going to be. Because you're right, so for some of those kids, a home ec class or a shop class or that sort of thing is going to be much more engaging to them and have them have a lot more interest in being in school. I would much rather see those pieces of the budgets going to support hands-on educators, even if that means we need to hire more hands-on educators so they have the time to create programs in education for children, specific for these children, this class, this experience. I'd rather see that money going to those sorts of positions than more consultants, administrators, et cetera.
What about the home economics?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for it. I mean, whatever we can do to get these kids so they want to be in school, so they want to learn. You can learn math by, measuring in cooking. You can learn math by measuring to build a box. There's lots of ways you can do it. It doesn't have to be sitting down with your textbook and learning math. And for a lot of kids, that's going to be a much better way to educate them. So yeah, all in.
Eileen, do you want to address it?
Sure, quickly, I can. Sorry, I have my jacket on for warmth over my legs.
That's good conservation.
Thank you. So again, Eileen Dickinson. I think that it is important to look at how this role is going to be filled. and what impacts it will have on our teachers, our students, and our community, and evaluate its effectiveness as it continues forward. Speaking to teachers in the school, there's definitely a desire to at least get help getting this piece of their teaching started and moving forward. And so whether that's this position becomes a consultant role and then it disappears over time if teachers feel empowered to make those choices on their own and they feel like they can. But that's something to be evaluated. And I think it's important to remember that while so often we think of just the St. Johnsbury School as what the school board works for, it's the St. Johnsbury School District, and all of the high school students are also, a part of that St. Johnsbury School District. So school-specific questions really do lie within what the need is in that school and what they see and what we're prioritizing. And I think the strategic planning process right now with the forums coming up and the survey out there is a really important time for community members to say, we do feel like this is important for our children, so that the district has a clear idea moving forward of what we do value and what is going to be best for our children. So I think when you put those things together, you have the opportunity to really provide opportunities. And the Catch program is doing a lot of wonderful things after school, and looking for ways to get that into the regular day is definitely something that's regularly discussed.
Home economics and industrial.
That was part of that, yes.
Do we have any more questions, either from the screen or from here?
Hi, my name is Lorraine Janowski.
Can you move a little closer?
My name is Lorraine Janowski. I live on Railroad Street, and I'm asking the people who are interested in select board positions, how do you serve and balance the needs of all people, the people who own businesses on Railroad Street, the people who work in those businesses, the people who come and shop at those businesses, and from my perspective, the people who live on Railroad Street. And when there's a storm like there is now, many elderly people cannot go outside. It's not safe. There's too much ice, there's too much snow, they can't get around. And it's important. You just talked about children being outside. We elders, we need to be outside too. So I'd like to hear how you would balance and prioritize the needs of all the different people. And of course, not just Railroad Street, but the whole town. But my playground is Railroad Street.
There you go.
So this is a particular topic that I have a very personal interest in. I convened a Zoom meeting of a number of elderly residents who live on Railroad Street and around a few days ago to specifically speak about safety, about walking safety, about sidewalk safety. And it is a critical issue for the Select Board, not only to address, but to, as I said earlier, to do something about. My understanding from talking with a number of residents is this has been an issue for a very long time. And it obviously is an issue that needs to be addressed and needs to be moved forward and needs to be resolved, because the safety, so again, we could talk a lot about the policy. There are policies around the country, and I sent that to our Zoom group. The Partnership for a Walkable America has some really interesting policy solutions for specifically to keep seniors safe in environments that are oftentimes either very cold or very snowy. But for us, one of the most important things that we can do is to make sure that the sidewalks, make sure that all of our sidewalks not only are free of snow and clear of debris, but are safely constructed, repaired when they need to be repaired, such that the problems with them do not become exacerbated and go on and on and on. In fact, again, whether I get elected or not, I certainly hope I do. David Roth, I forgot. I will work on this issue, because when my family and I first came here, it was one of the first things we thought is that My dad, I walked with him on his walker for 10 years, and I am very clear he couldn't have done this here, especially in the winter. So regardless of what happens on Tuesday, this is an issue that I feel very strongly about personally, and I think that a community that takes care of all of its residents has to focus on our, I don't want to say our elderly, but those who have the greatest life experience. Oftentimes their needs oftentimes come too far last, and I think that is that's an unfortunate reality in our society. Then maybe we can do something about it here. So I'm really glad you asked that question.
Steve Aisho. Yeah, to my elderly parents, I have also had to push them in a wheelchair or walk with them in a walker, so I'm very cognizant of walkability in St. Johnsbury. I love walking around in St. Johnsbury. What David said, you know, very much agree with all of that, that we actually had to do something about it. And one of the things, as a member of the select board, is not only listening to what people have to say, but advocating for what their needs are. And so taking that up, and the select board ourselves, this is going to involve Chad and his staff, and we're going to be working with him. So be advocating with Chad and his staff in order to get this up. As far as the balancing, you point out all the people who are downtown in Railroad Street, is that again, you have to make, I say us, as a, you know, as if I'm on this, the select board needs to be able to engage with all of the stakeholders, the people down there, see what they are, and bring the people together, because not people who may be visiting, people who the employees and stuff, they may not be aware of your situation. And so by bringing you together and building a relationship between all the people involved for all the various reasons, that's a way that we begin to build those relationships, and we begin to help each other. We realize we're a community. We're in this all together. But yes, that's obviously something we need to work on, and I would advocate for that, again, just from my own personal experience.
Tracy Shao. Thanks for asking that question. My mother-in-law recently moved to St. Johnsbury to live closer to my husband and I worry about her in the winter, and so I very much know what you're talking about. And as I was thinking about the role of the select board and the many decision-making, and Chad may disagree, but I think our infrastructure, you know, it's not always sexy. You might disagree, but it's a critical part of the underlying, you know, foundation of the community that help everyone be successful. And so when I think about the changing nature of our winters, which has already come up, I think the challenges have changed in terms of dealing with the ice and the melting. And so the strategies need to change, the investments need to change, and I agree with what's been said already. That is a really an important issue that will need kind of constant vigilance.
I think to Chad, infrastructure is sexy, but.
I have one for the select board, unless somebody has one for the school district.
That's okay.
Okay. So my wife and I own the bookstore in town. We have for 17 years, and I think you all know that. For the first 15 years of our existence, I always felt like there were way more headwinds than tailwinds. And that has shifted in the last 2 years, thankfully. I don't know if it seems to coincide with the pandemic. I'm not sure it is exactly what it is or what. But we still do have tailwinds, or we still do have headwinds in this town to economic development. And I'd like to know for each of the select board candidates is, what do you think is the biggest headwind that we face in economic development in this town, and what ideas you might have to solve that headwind?
There was a comment on the last topic. Maybe you could just read that. It wasn't a question, it was a comment.
So there was a comment, this came from, let me get up to it, to Nancy, I don't know Nancy, that's not the question. This was about sidewalks. This question is also critical to those with disabilities. Deferred care has contributed to the responsiveness and communication of our town. Departments also contributes. So.
Right. Okay, so.
Steve Aisho. One of the issues is housing here in St. Johnsbury. We know that this is a problem throughout throughout Vermont, throughout the country. And so we need to look at the housing situation, because like if you read in the Caledonia Record, Sean Tesser was talking about Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital and how they lost some staff because they could not provide housing. Chad was at our Energy Committee meeting this month and mentioned about how the academy and businesses also. So I think one thing we need is we need housing. And we have to not just say one type of housing. I think we have to look at middle income housing, which may not be in the downtown. We also know that people in St. Johnsbury want downtown housing. And so the other thing too is when you look at particularly younger folks, where they're looking to live is in, I guess, micro-metropolitan and in small towns. They want to live in a downtown where they can walk to their businesses and stuff. And so if we're going to attract some of them, we also have to have some housing that's downtown. And we may also look at empty buildings that are not being utilized that maybe can be converted into housing again to get the downtown. I think, when growing up here, the downtown was a destination. I can remember coming down. You would come downtown to do things. And so I'm not sure that we're going to be able to have all the brick and mortar stores. We know they're closing. We know every single town in Vermont and most states are not going to have the downtown or the business district that I had growing up. But I think one thing we can do is we can make downtown, or the business, I should say the business, because it goes up Eastern Avenue and Main Street, so I don't want to exclude them, a destination once again. And, some of the ideas that I have, like one is the concerts, Sunday afternoon at Dog Mountain. I've always thought we should have Sunday in St. Johnsbury. And so Sunday in the afternoon, things are going on downtown. So people, instead of just coming and going up to Dog Mountain, they're actually coming into town because there's ideas that are going on. The same thing like with First Night. I'm not sure where in Vermont, I'm sorry, I've forgotten, but they have First Fridays. So every First Friday, they have activities going on in downtown. So again, we're making this. I think of Jody Freed up at Catamount. He has, he's a big proponent of the creative economy. And I think we could utilize that because people in the Northeast Kingdom, as we know, are very, very creative. We have a lot of good entrepreneurs here. And so I think we could work with Catamount to, again, have more activities down here. Some people have suggested, closing off Railroad Street and making it into like Church Street in Burlington. I don't know about that. Because I actually was talking to Joelle about that, and she mentioned about how people pass through and they stop. So, I think we would have to have more of a study before we decide to block that off. But, the general thing, I think housing, Also, of course, I think our taxes have to be about as low. Another thing is that what we're now terming the Great Recession, where employees are, leaving their jobs and stuff like that. One of the things that a lot of employers now are very cognizant of is the quality of life. And I think when it comes to quality of life, as David explained in his opening statement, is we have it here in St. Johnsbury. And we can really market St. Johnsbury, because one of the things about vibrant and successful communities is they have strong relationships. There's trust among people. They also, they have things like recreational, culture, educational, and a good business district. So these things we can all, I think, capitalize on. So it's a multi-pronged situation, but again, I think we can, if we develop our relationship and we put on our creative and not be afraid to try things, because sometimes, that was the biggest thing at work, was, well, we've never done it, or that will fail before we even try. And fortunately, the division I worked in, we were always, well, let's give it a try. We'll see, and stuff. So, thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for that question. David Roth responding. And I was just looking at these numbers. In 2017, and I'm sure many of you were a part of this, there was a really interesting town plan that was created. And I think it'll be incumbent upon the select board to go back to that town plan, see what has been done, what needs to be done. But one of the most remarkable graphs in that plan in 2017 was just simply a graph of visitor spending. Business opportunities, for example, if there is just a 1% increase in the number of visitors to Vermont who are drawn to St. Johnsbury, the impact to us annually is at minimum $19 million. Now that is just literally, again, assuming a 1% increase in the number of visitors who are drawn to St. Johnsbury. So my specific answer, and a lot of my answers I group into threes because I think it's important to be able to discuss these things in sequential. First, entrepreneurship, encouraging entrepreneurship, not only investment, but true innovation. We often talk about, and this is an opportunity zone. I'm a bigger fan of innovation zones, where we're attracting entrepreneurs, innovators to create what's new in St. Johnsbury. Number two, certainly tourism, which relates to all three of these. We need to be bringing people here to St. Johnsbury. The tour buses, how many people go up to Stowe in leaf peeping season? Tour buses on every corner. Now that isn't necessarily what we want, but we at least want a few of them to come here. And that was actually, and a few of you know this, that was one of the reasons that I acquired the Artful Eye building, to create this new maple tourism infrastructure. If you think of Lake Champlain chocolates, where you see the chocolate being made, that's my vision for what we can do on Railroad Street, where you see the maple candies and maple creamies being made, and people can learn about the maple industry and the Abenakis and really have an experience right here in St. Johnsbury, and then go over and buy a book and have some coffee. We're not going to serve coffee. Have a book and then go up the street to the distillery. And third, of course, is housing. In 2017, of course, there was a housing study. 2017 was a prolific year. There was a significant housing study done. Obviously, every conversation about avoiding headwinds has to do with housing, as Steve said, and as so many of us have said. Just one point on the on Railroad Street. I would certainly not be a fan of closing it entirely, but I would be a fan of a couple nights a month, for example, at night, making it into a walking street, making it into a place where people can go, visit stores, have an opportunity like during the holidays when there were the great fireworks displays here, people were outside. I think it would be very good to help make this more of a destination, and walking is obviously a big part of destinations. So those headwinds are clear, but they're not amorphous. We can address specifics within those headwinds, I think, from certainly what we've discussed. But the numbers and the dollars that could come to us when people come here, that's self-evident. So thank you for asking that.
So Tracy Shao again. Great question, Scott. I agree. I've seen such a change in terms of the forward momentum and sort of the tailwinds versus headwinds, but I think keeping an eye out for the headwinds, and as a select board, removing those barriers and trying to, within what the select board can control. And so some of the things that have already been said, the focus on housing and seeing some of that already in play, and watching what's happened with New Avenue Hotel and sort of that public-private partnership that is really transformed what had been a real eyesore in our community, not just to bring great housing, but also new retail space. And I think some of the other remediation work to revitalize some of the buildings and some of the infrastructure that unfortunately we're saddled with the history of will also help us to move forward. And so I won't repeat some of the ideas because I agree with all of them. I think the only thing I would add to that is that what I have watched the town be really good at recently is leveraging community resources to attract funding from outside St. Johnsbury to really maximize that, and going after really smart and strategic grants, being good at that. And I think that success builds on success. We're in a part of the state that's really challenged, and I think that's part of the headwind, is we're not Chittenden County, we don't have the number of people, but we are an opportunity zone. We can attract funding that can match our own tax dollars and our own business investments to really push ourselves forward and get some things done here that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I really commend Chad and Joe and the work you have been doing, and I know that requires select board support and strategy, so I would look forward to doing more of that as serving on the select board.
I think we had a question, right, on the screen?
The question online came from Greg Robbins. Will the select board candidates support realistic, long-lasting repairs to the two Concord Avenue bridges and the Portland Street Bridge? Current efforts to mitigate potholes are fruitless and waste of tax dollars.
All right.
Oh, Steve Aisho. Well, this is an opportune time to bring this up about the infrastructure, because we'll be getting around $2 million of ARPA fund. And so projects like this fall under the ARPA funding. And I know that here in St. Johnsbury, we have an advisory committee. And so one thing that I would encourage you to do is to make sure that you bring this concern to them and to Chad. And I would assume that, Chad, you're well aware of those two bridges.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, yeah, it's money, and this may be something with the ARPA fund that could help us in this situation.
David Roth. The short answer is yes, absolutely. And Steve and I are certainly of a piece relative to believing this has to be a priority. One thing in your note that was interesting when you talked about potholes filling them being fruitless. For example, we cannot have a place that is a destination and a quality of life when, for example, there are streets like School Street. And I know you certainly know about this, others know about this. My daughter and I went driving the other day, and I thought, well, this just can't be. But again, that's a question of deferred maintenance that just simply, to what Chad's point said, yes, it's about money, but it's also about creating the priority, ensuring that that agenda item ensuring that the agenda item not only relies on discussion, but that we actually get these things done. And so, again, the reason I read that passage from the early part of the century is that infrastructure has always been a concern. It is now, again, we have the opportunity because of federal dollars and other dollars coming in here to finally address those issues in a way that ensures that that the bridges are repaired and are operational, and that streets like School Street are few and far between, if not non-existent.
Anything from folks here?
Yes. Great.
As the town goes forward, my name is Walter Soffren. I've lived here for about 32 years now. And one of the things there's a lot of things in this town that I enjoy and that I also am sad to see occurring. A lot of demolition of buildings. Over the time I've been here, I think we've eaten out a big chunk of the town's historic identity by knocking down buildings all over the place, but what I wanted to mention was there are certain key areas in this town where you cannot walk. You can't get from, you can't, as you're walking down Railroad Street, you get to a point near the Concord Street Bridge, you can't continue on to Hastings Hill. The hospital, that whole area along Route 5 has developed over the decades. You can't walk there safely, and there are people walking there all the time, riding bicycles. It's really dangerous. You can't get on Breezy Hill Road to the hospital. So the town has sort of outgrown its original footprint, and I think it's, as part of the strategic plan, I would ask for your comments as select candidates on how we're going to re-envision our footprint, not only as the village, but as the town, so that we have this safety issue, this walkability, and there's some real infrastructural challenges like the river and the railroad tracks and things that limit the ability to push sidewalks and properties, out in order to make room for pedestrians. But I find, as I've gotten older, I enjoy walking more now that I have more time and my kids are grown up and gone. I have more time to walk around, and I find it really challenging, especially in the bad weather. You can walk on certain streets, a car will go by and you'll get covered in water because of the pothole that's filled with water. There's a lot of things that limit the ability of people to enjoy walking in the community. And I think the more walking there might be, it would promote more small business, because a lot of times when you walk, you're looking for something to do. You're looking for a place to go and maybe even spend your money. So I'm curious of the select board candidates, how they envision that kind of challenge of how to improve pedestrian access and things like that.
Thank you for that question, David Roth. This, of course, not only relates to, as we said, people who have greater life experience, but to all of us. Whenever I have a Jeep. Whenever I take my Jeep in for service, I always walk back and forth to pick it up. It's an unpleasant walk, summertime or wintertime, because there is obviously not sidewalks the entire way. They're not sidewalks, and I certainly wouldn't take my kids on that walk with me. So the answer to your question is obviously multifaceted, and there's an economics associated with it, but that also, more importantly, is about the creation of a plan. That 2017 plan talks about it. We need St. Johnsbury to be a place where people feel comfortable walking and bicycling. It also relates to our discussion earlier about climate mitigation and efficiency. It just simply, we need to be creating an environment where people can walk when they need to get somewhere. Again, when I take my car in, I have to walk. We need to be able to create an environment where people can walk when they have to, but more importantly, where they want to, where people, families want to walk, want to bicycle, want to have that experience in the weather, which usually here, regardless of the season, is quite special, quite remarkable, and certainly in the summertime. So the way that this gets done is, as I said at the very beginning, we have to prioritize it and get it done. That gets done by, what does the select board do? Everyone here knows this. Select board controls the purse strings, which means the select board controls that agenda. The select board is responsible for creating the agenda relative to usage of dollars, with, of course, within collaboration with the town's professional staff. So if it isn't an articulated priority, and it's then not a budgeted priority, it'll never get done, and we'll just talk about it. But by doing both of those things, again, I think it's a fascinating conversation, which I will be involved with no matter what, that regardless of where you are in the chronology of life, we need to be able to get from hither to thither in St. Johnsbury more enjoyably and more safely.
Steve Aisho. I could not agree more with you about preserving our heritage in our buildings. We have some incredible buildings here in this town, and we can thank the Fairbanks family. And and that's one of the reasons that I was a big proponent of the bond for saving the Armory. I know some people wanted to tear it down and put in a parking lot because there's not enough parking on Main Street, and I was definitely opposed to that. You know, talk about, what is it, tearing down Paradise and putting up a parking lot. That's exactly what would have happened with that Armory. As far as the walkability, this has been something that the Town Energy Committee has been focusing on, and in fact, this late spring, early summer, we're going to have an e-bike event here, and it's in collaboration with the Bike Committee and also Locomotion and probably some others. But the fact that there's actually a website, it may be walkability.com, and you can actually put, I think walkability for my house is 2%. So I know, and again, outside the district. And again, it's us advocating for it. And it's the economic issue of this will also come up like it did with the Armory, and we expect that. We don't want to be spending our money frivolously. But, so in other words, what I'm saying is this needs to be a priority. We need to take an effort in it, but we're also going to have to be probably creative in the ways that we do it, because this is also a way we can make downtown, the business area, a destination for people, because if they can't get here, we're out of luck. So.
I'll just echo, I agree with what's been said. At the time, I agree with your concerns and the strategies that we've read so far.
Tracy's agreeing, so for those who didn't hear. Any other questions? Well, I'll close with one. I would ask each of the candidates who are here, if we had this a year from now and you were elected, what would you be proudest of that was accomplished?
You want to start down there?
Yeah, start with the
Let's have one thing that you're proud of.
Peter Van Stratten. So one thing I'd like to push for on the school board, is to have the school building itself, the physical building, be used as much more of a community asset. I just think it's a great facility, and the public doesn't spend enough time in it. It could be, rec basketball on Saturdays. It could be Cub Scouts on Sundays. It could be the knitting club, the painting club. It's just in some ways going to waste right now, especially given our harsh winter. It could really be used a lot more. That would be great.
Lisa Whitney. I would be most proud next year if we come up with a school budget that is leaner and meaner and better suits our community and our children.
Tracy Shao. I would be proud to say that I was part of a select board that continued the recent tradition of really successful decision-making and meetings that continue to move the community forward, especially as we emerge from this pandemic and we look to leverage the kind of funds that are coming our way to keep batting out against the headwinds.
Eileen Dickinson, back to the school board real fast. I would be most proud of a completed strategic plan with clear objectives and accountability measures built in.
I'm gonna hope you know this.
Writing it down.
I'm writing it down.
Steve Aisho. I think what I would be most proud of is if we have developed a close-knit community with some strong relationships. We have built trust, and we all work together. We get to know what all the various concerns, priorities, possibilities, and we are working towards those.
Thank you, David. David Roth. Two very specific ones.
I said one.
Well, okay, well, the 1.5. I want you to be able to come next year and say that it's easier to get around on Railroad Street, and I want Sean Tester to be able to tell me that he no longer has problems recruiting emergency frontline personnel because they can't find places to live. That would be an extraordinary year.
Well, thank everybody for listening from home and participating, and for everybody being here. And we'll have an informational meeting on Monday night. That's going to be also Zoomed, and I guess in the band room at the...
Yeah, so for people that don't have access to technology, or they don't have high-speed internet at their home, or they don't have technical ability to attend, the school is opening up an in-person availability in the band room starting at 7:30. People that do have access to technology, we're encouraging you to use that because there's limited space. So we're just trying to do that. So Brian, Ricka, myself, and David will be in person there. And we're basically just setting a room that people can observe and participate. And, the participation is a big part of our criminal heritage here.
And then voting is in person here on Tuesday at the Welcome Center. So thank you all for coming and participating. Thank the candidates. Thank you, folks.